Leader of the Opposition.
It's also for the Premier. Premier, last week your Health Minister bowed to public outrage and provided the Erie St. Clair Community Care Access Centre with an additional $4.1 million towards their deficit. Premier, there are 14 CCACs in Ontario. Throughout the province, CCACs are being forced to claw back healthcare services because of budgetary pressures. Earlier this year, my colleague, the member for Dufferin-Caledon, brought to your attention the fact that the Central West CCAC would have to cut the number of new patients it could accept. That is, despite the fact that since 2010, the amount of patients needing the CCAC services has nearly doubled. Premier, is your Health Minister going to provide new funding for all CCACs?
Thank you, Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, and I know that the Minister of Health and Long-Term Care will want to speak to this in the supplementary, but the fact is we're investing more than $4.3 billion in the community sector, Mr. Speaker, and we've increased that funding by $270 million this year, Mr. Speaker, in 2014-15. So we continue to invest more in the community sector, Mr. Speaker, and as I have said many times in this House, we are in a transition. There is no doubt about that. We are changing the way we deliver health services in Ontario. People want care in their homes, they want care in the community, and we are moving to a system that provides much more of that care in the community, Mr. Speaker. But we have to continue to work with the CCACs, work with the community or agencies, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that people get the care that they need when they need it. To that end, we continue to invest and increase funding to that sector, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, Premier, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, CUPE, says there's been a 33% spike in the demand for home care. We can expect this trend to continue as our population ages. CUPE says the Southwest Community Care Access Centre, and the NDP obviously think this is funny, which services patients in a large geographical area from London to Grey Bruce, is resorting to cutting care for some ill patients, denying care to others altogether. Premier, do you believe the $250 million you squandered on the failed SAMS computer system could have been better used to help people who need care through our CCACs?
Minister of Health and Long-Term Care.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the question. Mr. Speaker, we're investing more than $4 billion this year in home and community care across the province. That's an increase of more than $250 million from last year. But I want to talk about what we're particularly proud of. We've got a team that's being led right now by Gail Donner, and those in the home and community sector see this woman for the experience that she's got and the leadership that she's providing to help us look at our home and community sector as we continue to transform as a province and transform our healthcare system. We've been focusing, Mr. Speaker, as everyone in this legislature knows, over the past several years on our acute care facilities. Now we're beginning to turn our attention in a very substantive way to home and community care. We know there are improvements that need to be made. We know that we need to make sure that we're providing the highest quality of care to people where they need it, as close to home as possible. We're working on that, and with Gail Donner's leadership, I expect a report back in January. I'm sure that we're going to have solid recommendations to help us guide us into the future.
Final supplementary.
Again to the Premier. Premier, our CCACs have their backs against the wall. The reason they're not receiving adequate funding is because the government has dug a deep fiscal hole. Over a decade of Liberal mismanagement means we're spending millions on servicing debt interest payments and waste. That money should be invested towards safeguarding frontline health care and providing for patients in need. Premier, your health minister even vowed to, quote, personally address any issues with specific clients who say they are not getting the care they needed. And to quote, well, we're hearing dozens of stories by the day, hundreds by the week. So, Premier, have you asked your minister to directly report to you about these individual cases? And if so, how many house calls has the good doctor made?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to make a few house calls if that is going to lead us down that important path of continuing to improve our healthcare system. But I want the same thing that I did privately with the NDP last week. I want to do publicly, not just with the Conservatives, but with the NDP, to actually implore them, if they have specific examples, and I suspect, if they have specific.
The member from Essex, come to order. The member from Dufferin-Caledon, come to order. The member from Essex, second time.
Speaker, party. In fact, with my colleagues on this side of the legislature as well. It's an important part of my job. It's a responsibility as a Minister of Health and as a healthcare professional I take very, very seriously. So I would ask them if they are aware through their constituency offices or elsewhere, if they're aware of specific individuals whose health is being compromised because of what they perceive or a real or actual change in the support that they're providing at home in the community, I would ask them to bring those specific cases to my attention, and I commit to working with them to resolve them.
Your question, the leader of the third party.